you to go ahead. Thank you, Michael, and thank you all again for joining us. Welcome to the MRRRI Upper River Community Update. My name is Maisa Khan. I am the Policy Director for the Mississippi River Network. I'm currently based out of St. Louis, Missouri, but I am moving to the Upper River at the end of the summer. So I'll be in Wisconsin by the end of the summer. So I'm delighted to be with you all, my future Upper Mississippi River neighbors. I'm joined today by Riley Hintz and Alex Keelty from the Lake Pepin Legacy Alliance, Scott Lasser from Clean Wisconsin, and Trevor Russell from Friends of the Mississippi River. And we'll all be taking turns going through these presentation slides. So you'll get to hear a little bit from all of us. But today's event is part of my organization, Mississippi River Network's River Days of Action, which is bringing together thousands of people. We started on June 7th. Was that Monday or Tuesday of this week? It's been a blur, and we're going through the weekend to June 12th with 40 events hosted by more than 40 organizations and community partners, all up and down the Mississippi River, together with our neighbors in nearly all 10 states that the Mississippi River flows through or borders. We're taking action to create a healthier river for people, land, water, and wildlife. Founded in 2005, the Mississippi River Network has grown into a diverse and powerful coalition of over 60 organizations and businesses from the river's headwaters in Minnesota to its mouth in Louisiana. And the network implements the only national public engagement and advocacy program of its kind for the river called One Mississippi, which has inspired thousands of actions and grown a community of over 20,000 river citizens. From armchairs to wading boots, our river citizens are everyday people the river can count on. River citizens speak up for the people, land, water, and wildlife of our Mississippi River watershed and take action in simple ways that make a big difference. I can already tell by the fact that you are joining us on a Friday summer afternoon that you are part of the Mississippi River community, and we would love for you all to join us and become a river citizen. We'll share links in the chat and as follow-ups. And I want to invite you all to join hundreds of your fellow river citizens who are speaking up during this week's River Days of Action and calling on Congress to restore our Mississippi River. And as a bonus, of all of the 40+ River Days of Action events we have going on this week, this one is going to make you an expert in the very action that we're supporting that I'm about to share. So all of the folks who are participating in the River Days of Action, Unified Action, are calling on Congress to invest in clean water, healthy habitats, nature-based solutions to flooding, and reducing aquatic invasive species, which also happen to be the 4 bucket areas of MRRRI, or the Mississippi River Restoration Resilience Initiative, that you're going to learn a lot about today. So I will share the link to this action now, but I will also share it again at the end of this presentation. If you're a person who likes to learn a little bit more about something before you take action, you're in luck, because this is the absolute perfect event. But if you want to take the action now, I'm going to give everyone 5 seconds to click on this link. We are over 100 actions as of today. So with you all, we can get to 130 actions by the end of the hour, and hopefully hundreds more by the time we conclude River Days of Action at the over the weekend. But before I turn it over to Trevor to get us started, just a few housekeeping items about this presentation. If you have questions for us at any time, feel free to type them into the chat. I'll monitor our questions and collect them, and we'll have some time at the very end of all of our slides to take to do a little Q and A, and then any questions we don't get to, we'll follow up via email. And then, as I said, when we started, we're recording this webinar. It'll be posted to our One Mississippi YouTube channel. So we'll share that link with you if there are others that would benefit from learning about MRRRI. Okay, I think that's all I got. So with that, I will turn it over to Trevor.
Well, thank you, Maisa. I think everyone on this call acknowledges the Mississippi River is a critical environmental, cultural, and economic resource and a river that's celebrated nationwide. But despite its importance, the river is facing some serious challenges. Runoff has drastically reduced water quality and harmed aquatic life. The impact of climate change is already affecting the river in numerous ways, making our river communities more vulnerable to floods, hurricanes, and other catastrophic weather events. Aquatic invasive species, such as invasive silver carp, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this presentation, threaten the ecosystem as well as fisheries and recreational industries that rely on them. And further downstream, the river's delta with its marshes, swamps, and barrier islands continues to lose ground to erosion, while the annual Gulf dead zone or hypoxic zone continues to have terrible consequences for our environment and economy. Next slide. The Mississippi River is unlike some of our other treasured waterways in that we've seen place-based federal programs begin to reverse similar declines in other high-profile waterways like the Everglades or Great Lakes or Chesapeake Bay. Such geographically funded programs allow us to better coordinate existing federal and state efforts that increase participation at all levels with states, tribes, local governments, and NGOs working together to better address challenges that face those water bodies. So while the Everglades, Great Lakes, Chesapeake Bay all have dedicated federal funding programs, the Mississippi River does not. And we believe it's the Mississippi River's turn now. So that's why we think it's time for the Mississippi River Restoration and Resilience Initiative, or MRRRI. Next slide. MRRRI is not regulatory. It won't create any new federal or state or local policies or regulations or be used to enforce regulations. MRRRI is a voluntary funding program. Our goal is to secure between $300 and $350 million per year for the 10 main stem Mississippi River states and tribal nations. Funds would be available to state, local, regional governments, tribal nations and organizations, research institutions, NGOs, partnerships, and others. To be eligible, river programs and projects would need to be within the watershed of the Mississippi River and its tributaries within the 10 main stem river states and tribal nations that border the river. And now I'll turn it over to Scott. Scott, you are muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We heard you when you said, "Can you hear me now?" but not after that. Nope.
Roll with that. I apologize for the technical difficulties, folks. Somewhat belatedly, I will take over from Trevor and talk.
Scott, you might be muting yourself somehow when you begin speaking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see for the fourth time if that works. I want to talk a little bit about MRRRI's impact and need and zero in on Minnesota and Wisconsin. So as we saw from the prior slide and this slide on the right, MRRRI will help up and down the basin. But the reality is that significant portions of Wisconsin and Minnesota will benefit from investments from MRRRI. The majority of both states are in the Mississippi River watershed, and both states have also benefited from some of the place-based programs that Trevor mentioned just a couple of slides ago. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative has done so much to address agricultural runoff and restore habitat in the Lake Michigan and Lake Superior basins. And so we know firsthand what a durable, enduring, and meaningful federal investment in these water resources can mean on the landscape. And in our view, the Mississippi River is well overdue for an investment like the ones that have been made in some of these other places. And the great thing is we have a blueprint for success already out there. And so we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can tailor this program specifically for the Mississippi River and its communities and its needs. But we know what we're looking for, and we know what we can get with an investment like this. You can go to the next slide. I want to focus on some of the real needs that Minnesota and Wisconsin share. And we've benefited from this initiatives like this before. Both of our states have significant drinking water, habitat degradation, and flooding and extreme weather challenges. In Western Wisconsin, we've seen repeated 500-year storms that have flooded entire communities along Mississippi River tributaries, washed out dams and other infrastructure in agricultural areas that are meant to protect communities. And in Wisconsin, we have tens of thousands of families who do not have safe drinking water because of excessive nitrate pollution. We know that the vast majority of that nitrate pollution is a consequence of fertilizer and manure application for growing crops. And the prospect of bringing federal resources to address persistent problems like this is really appealing. And in Wisconsin, we've really struggled in underinvesting in our water resources. The majority in the legislature has repeatedly resisted attempts to invest in our water resources, despite a lot of public awareness around these challenges. And Minnesota, while they've invested significantly in water resources and been fortunate to bring so much of the resources from their state to this, the fact that those problems still remain is a testament to the need for an enduring and broad federal investment in addressing these challenges. We know that things like nitrate pollution and the degradation of our natural infrastructure have been developing for decades, and it's going to take a big concerted push to address them. And MRRRI is an important foundation for that. And I am going to turn it back over to Alex.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, so to kind of get into the structure of this piece of legislation, MRRRI is going to, in effect, if we're able to pass it, create a Mississippi River National Program Office housed in the Environmental Protection Agency. And the EPA would coordinate MRRRI, but will work closely with other federal agencies and state and local partners for implementation. And so, as we've kind of repeated a few times, and we'll kind of dive into a little deeper now, MRRRI will fund support in 4 major kind of focus areas. So MRRRI funding will fund projects or actions that restore clean water, protect and restore river habitat, rebuild natural infrastructure, improving river delta health, and reduce the impact of aquatic invasive species. So I'll kind of talk just explicitly about this first piece, this water quality piece. So there would be 3 buckets for this clean water funding. Primarily, we're talking about urban runoff, stormwater pollution, and combined sewer overflow events where raw sewage is discharged through surface waters, or into surface waters through storm sewers. And we're also talking about cropland runoff, investing in programs that conserve and protect land that plays a significant role in water pollution, promoting soil health to help croplands retain water and filter out pollutants, and promote landscape scale vegetative cover, perennial grains, perennial woody crops, winter annual cover crops, perennial pasture, and other approaches to keep more ground in the river's watershed covered by vegetation year round. And so this kind of piece is a work that we're very excited about. So CLC stands for continuous living cover crops. And when we're kind of considering ag runoff as a nutrient source for pollution in the hypoxic zone in the Gulf, we're talking about 60% of nutrient pollution coming from ag runoff, which, just as Scott had said, is coming from over application of the fertilizers, the kind of primary NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium fertilizers, as well as overflow from manure application and poorly maintained manure lagoons. So continuous living cover relies on also the acceptance of a diversified cropping system, which would allow us to cover soils even in shoulder seasons. So spring and the fall, between the maybe more kind of dominant crops on the landscape, where given traditional cropping techniques, we have long periods of just bare land, where soils can be very swiftly moved to our watersheds, along with the excess nutrients. So we can go to the next slide. We are this weekend, upcoming weekend, next Saturday, June 18th, as kind of part of this work, hosting an event focused on one of the more promising and economically viable crops in this emerging kind of collection of technologies called Kernza, which is a kind of cousin of wheat, but which is perennial. And so you can kind of see in our poster, the long roots diving deep into the soils are its kind of trademark, and due to the fact this plant doesn't need to be replanted very frequently and can be harvested continuously, the roots can grow and have proven through an excessive body of research to keep an immense amount of nutrients out of our watersheds, holding them in the soil matrix. So all of that nerdy stuff aside, it's very exciting, and we're going to have an event that's kind of a little bit like a public launch for these crops on the shores of Lake Pepin in Lake City. And we'll have a bunch of opportunities to drink and eat and talk and listen to farmers and grazers who have been interacting with these new crops, and hear from them how legislation like MRRRI and our work on the Farm Bill can support more land adopting these technologies. And I'll pass it to Riley.
And restoring wetlands, supporting in-stream habitat, reconnecting side channels, supporting living shorelines, and many more things. So the next, if you want to go to the next slide, Michael, one of the projects that we're working on, I think, addresses this specific piece of habitat restoration and also gets into the next piece a little bit, which is natural infrastructure and the responsible transport of sediment from the navigation channel. So at the head of Lake Pepin, and I know there's a wide variety of people on the call, but Lake Pepin is filling in rapidly with sediment, and the ecosystem is degrading, particularly at the head of the lake. And so we have worked on a habitat restoration project in conjunction with the Corps of Engineers and the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources to bring life back to this area. This is a project that was originally considered back in the 1980s, and due to funding limitations and a few other pieces, ultimately nothing really happened to move this project forward until about 2014, when Pepin Legacy Alliance and Audubon jointly kind of pushed the Corps of Engineers to consider this. And so ultimately, I mean, this is an area that's part of the Pierce County Islands Wildlife Area in Wisconsin. It's the only publicly managed waterfowl area and refuge in this stretch of the river. And it's also one of the largest contiguous stretches of floodplain forest habitat in the Midwest. The project, once completed, and construction will begin next year, will provide increased and improved recreational opportunities like bird watching, hunting, fishing, trapping, boating, wildlife observation, environmental education opportunities, by creating new habitat for fish and for waterfowl, and also restoring some access for small boats in the Bay City community that have been completely cut off from the river due to this excessive sedimentation. It's a $24 million habitat restoration project, and it is one of 10 projects nationwide to be selected for a pilot program that helps cover the cost of sediment transport to actually build what you see on this image, these green pieces that are island extensions or peninsulas that help to create clean water and also provide floodplain forest habitat. And so how this connects to MRRRI, I mean, one, the specific habitat objectives are part of the pieces that MRRRI could help fund. And the nice thing is that when we tried to get this project working and moving forward, we looked at a few sources of funding. There aren't very many available. And the primary one available typically has at least 30 projects in the queue that are all waiting for funding that will take many, many years to happen. We got lucky by using the Corps' beneficial use of dredge material program in that it was an underutilized program and the Corps had some specific needs to use that material in a beneficial way and some funding available. And then this pilot program actually added $5 million to the project to cover the transportation of the material dredged. And that is something that MRRRI specifically calls out. And that means all of the other dollars can go directly towards habitat, which is a huge bonus because transporting dredge material is very expensive. So that's where it kind of ties into that natural infrastructure piece of keeping the river open, but instead of just piling that sediment somewhere off, off site, it can do something to bring life back to the river. So I think that's really exciting that this work, we can do more of it to bring life back to the river, but also that different from many of these Corps of Engineers programs, it's really designed to be community driven and to allow communities to kind of lead their own priorities, obviously based in science and much of the work that the agencies have already done to think about what would be helpful, but that there's really a voice for community members to consider what would be a priority for their area and what are the values of those communities. So this is one example of the type of work that happens to benefit both Minnesota and Wisconsin, being on the border in the Mississippi River, that we could see more of if this initiative is passed. And I think then Scott is going to talk a little further about the natural infrastructure piece and tie it back again to Wisconsin.
Yeah. Thanks, Riley. So she just gave you a really concrete example of a natural infrastructure project, and I want to highlight a few other ones that are a little bit more applicable beyond the main stem of the river and up in the basin. So sediment removal is certainly something that we can do in the river in a project like that, but the other reality is that if we can work upstream to trap that sediment before it gets into the river system and starts moving downstream, that's another way to address it. And so things like voluntary easements, like upper watershed, wetland and floodplain restorations may seem sort of small in scope compared to work on the main stem of the Mississippi, but these things add up. And if we've learned anything over the years, and if the Mississippi River itself, as such a significant water resource that touched so many states, has taught us anything, it's that fertilizer that we apply in Wisconsin and Minnesota and wetlands that we do or do not take care of have impacts all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And there's a really cool project that one of our colleague organizations has worked on in Wisconsin the last few years, bringing Gulf shrimpers up to meet with farmers in Wisconsin to talk about the challenges that they face in professions that rely a lot on cooperation from Mother Nature, and in how what we choose to do on our land in Wisconsin is affecting folks all the way down in the Delta and out in the Gulf of Mexico. And I think that really speaks to the breadth of what natural infrastructure means with MRRRI and what it means in different parts of the river and to different states. Next slide. Invasive species is another one that we touched on. Zebra mussels are a horrible invasive that we've had to deal with throughout rivers and Great Lakes. Asian carp are one that were already mentioned. Wisconsin is watching really closely the efforts in the Chicago River to keep Asian carp from progressing up into Lake Michigan. The damage that they can do and other invasives can do are well established. I like to point out that invasive species are kind of a sleeping 800-pound gorilla that's overshadowed right now by things like climate change. It took us a long time to appreciate just how immense of a challenge climate change would be. And I think invasive species are where climate change was maybe 10 or 20 years ago. We need to focus on addressing them, manage them, and combating them, but they've already had and will continue to have significant impacts on our ecosystems and on our communities and the natural resources that we rely on. And the more that we can do upfront before they become established, before they spread, the better off we will, better position we will be to manage them in the future. Next slide. I just want to touch on a few more sort of Wisconsin specific considerations, but again, these are really relevant in our sister state as well. Persistent agricultural runoff and drinking water challenges. There was just a report released in Southwest Wisconsin looking at widespread bacteria and nitrate contamination that is a consequence of both septic systems, but also agriculture, fertilizer spreading, manure spreading. And this has resulted in private wells with as much as a quarter of the private wells in some counties tested being above our nitrate drinking water standard. These are extremely high levels of nitrate contamination. We see that in Southwest Wisconsin. We see that in the Central Sands, which is part of the Wisconsin River Basin, which is also part of the Mississippi River Basin, because that's where the Wisconsin River ends up. And so there's a real opportunity in Wisconsin to make the kinds of investments that we have neglected for a very long time in managing agricultural runoff and in the impacts that that runoff has on our surface water resources as well as drinking water, because we are so reliant on groundwater and on private wells in Wisconsin for drinking water. And, you know, we've talked a lot about natural resources today. We've talked about water. We've talked about habitat. Ultimately, you know, MRRRI is about the communities that live in these places and need these natural resources and need these investments. And so this is about rural resiliency and rural revitalization in the face of these persistent water challenges and the fact that climate change will only compound them and make them harder to address. That may sound ominous. The really exciting thing that's happening right now and that we're recognizing is that oftentimes when we invest in climate or water solutions, we're helping address that other problem just as well. So many of the agricultural practices that we talk about to address water and protect our water actually help with climate change. They help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They prepare farms and rural communities to be more resilient in the face of the impacts that we're already facing. And in a similar vein, some of the investments that we're looking to make from a climate perspective can be really helpful to protect our water resources. And so it's a chance to really tell a story about what the opportunity here as much as the challenge and what we can accomplish with a durable investment like MRRRI. And I think another thing that we need to understand and that I want to end with is when we talk about these agricultural runoff challenges and these climate and water challenges, this isn't something that we can just accomplish by sort of tinkering or working at the margins with our food systems and agriculture. This is about a long-lasting investment in transforming a system, a food system, an agricultural system that has really let down a lot of rural communities and a lot of farmers too. And this is not something that we can put upon or expect of the agricultural community. It's something that we all have to walk hand in hand to accomplish, and it's going to take a while. And that only serves to drive home the importance of beginning that investment as soon as possible. And the really good news is this isn't just about, you know, saying no to one farming practice or another, or just going back to a landscape with wetlands and prairies. There are opportunities to transform in an economically viable and vibrant way how we do agriculture, how we grow our food, and the economic opportunities that presents in all of these rural communities throughout the basin. And so I think it's both daunting and really exciting what we have in front of us and what we need to do to take on these water and climate challenges. But MRRRI is exactly the type of investment that we need as a down payment on this, and it needs to happen in a complementary fashion with similar investments by the states. And that's something that we continue to work hard on in Wisconsin, and occasionally look to inspiration from our neighbors in Minnesota. So just cannot say enough about the urgency of passing something like MRRRI and the need to bring these resources on the ground to a whole host of projects that are long overdue. And I think I'm going to turn it back over to Trevor now to talk about actually moving this initiative forward.
Thank you, Scott. We've talked a little bit today about some examples of projects that MRRRI could potentially fund, but you may be asking yourselves exactly what specific projects will MRRRI fund and when? And that will be up to all of us. We believe that river projects are more effective when all river voices have a seat at the planning table. That's why the first step for MRRRI is to bring people together to shape this initiative through a 2-year EPA-led public process to develop the MRRRI action plan that would look out over the next 5 years and prioritize investments in the river. And that plan would be updated periodically to make sure it's always fresh. When it's time for us to identify priority projects and build this action plan, we'll be sure to reach out to all of you and encourage your participation. Next slide. To support a science-based or evidence-based approach to MRRRI investments, the science plan will also be incorporated with the action plan. The science plan will be developed through a new National Mississippi River Corridor Research Center hosted within the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, with 3 regional centers based out of host universities working with a diverse range of scientists in different reaches of the river. Next slide. We also want to take a moment to touch on MRRRI and equity, because we also know that voices of those most impacted by environmental decisions are often excluded, underrepresented, or ignored in making environmental decisions. And so that's why the MRRRI Act proposes that at least 25% of funds be directed toward activities that primarily benefit economically disadvantaged urban and rural communities and communities of color, with an additional 10% of MRRRI funding to be invested in communities with persistent poverty. Prioritizing investments in communities of color and low-income, rural and urban communities is important to many of our congressional leaders and groups like ours that support the MRRRI vision. And then also want to note that throughout MRRRI, we want to create an environment where federal agencies seek to work with tribal governments in the spirit of self-determination and maximum flexibility, and in a way that's consistent with federal Indian trust responsibilities, treaty obligations, and congressional objectives to support tribal priorities consistent with MRRRI goals. And so some key principles to ensure these goals are met that we're working to embed in the MRRRI process are authentic tribal engagement in terms of tribes having the opportunity to authentically participate throughout the development of MRRRI, including in the action plan and MRRRI science plan development process. Second is including a distinct tribal program, which is a proven tool for empowering tribes and intertribal agencies to pursue set-aside funding through the Bureau of Indian Affairs. This is a consistent, simplified mechanism for securing funding and reporting results that tribes have told us that they would like to see embedded in MRRRI. We want to make sure that funding is available for both capacity building and direct project implementation and grow over time with the size of the program. And include both protection and restoration. We've heard that some similar programs make it a challenge for tribes to fund protection and preservation activities, and we want to ensure that that's not the case with MRRRI. And now I'll turn it over to Maisa.
Thanks, Trevor. So you've heard a lot today, but I want to reiterate what my other colleagues have said, that we are just in the beginning phases of this process. I see organizations represented here. I see state legislators in the audience. You all know from working on other big pieces of legislation like the Farm Bill or the Water Resources Development Act, we are just at the very, very beginning of establishing what MRRRI is, what the collaborative is. So I just want to say that at the outset to say, this is your invitation now that you've downloaded all of the information we have to share. We want everyone to plug into this process how you can. But right now we have over 30 regional, state, local, and national organizations and entities working together as what we call the MRRRI Collaborative. We just get together, share information, strategize about how to best implement MRRRI and engage with our respective communities, just as we are doing here today, this afternoon. And of course, you know, the Mississippi River Network, we work in all 10 states. But the MRRRI Collaborative and MRN benefit greatly from state-based organizations like Pepin Legacy Alliance, like Clean Wisconsin, and Friends of the Mississippi River, because when it comes to something like MRRRI, it's going to be our state-based organizations and you all that have the expertise and relationships on the ground in our states to know what kinds of projects are going to make the biggest impact and where. So this is just an invitation again to stay. I'm sure many of you are connected with like Pepin or Clean Wisconsin or FMR, and those are going to be your best connections to getting plugged in your states. If you're from other states, we'll talk about where you can find more information, but in Illinois, we're working really closely with Prairie Rivers Network. Here in Missouri, working with Conservation Federation of Missouri. So we have lots of state-based orgs that can help you get plugged in. And speaking of getting plugged into the process, where are we in the process? So this is going to be very briefly the legislative update, and you'll see in the next slide a little recall your Schoolhouse Rock jingles. So right now we are in what is called the authorizing legislation phase. We have a bill introduced in the House for MRRRI. The bill number is HR 4202. It was introduced last summer by our champion, Congresswoman Betty McCollum from Minnesota. And the House bill currently has 9 co-sponsors from 7 different states and the District of Columbia. And of course, you know, between like Pepin Legacy Alliance and FMR and all the other orgs that are working on this, we've reached out to every single congressional office in the river corridor in the last couple of months. So we're still reaching out to make sure that this bill can have bipartisan support. Right now, the 9 co-sponsors are Benny Thompson from Mississippi, Corey Bush, my representative in Missouri, Stephen Cohen from Tennessee, Yarmouth from Kentucky, Jim Cooper from Tennessee, Lauren Underwood from Illinois, Dean Phillips from Minnesota, Troy Carter from Louisiana, and Eleanor Norton from DC, to just give you a little bit of a rundown on where we're at. There's also progress on Senate bill text, and we're all working really hard to see a bipartisan Senate introduction. We're really hopeful that this can happen soon. And as I said in the last couple slides, even if we are able to pass MRRRI tomorrow, which we wouldn't because it's Saturday, or maybe Congress would work tomorrow for MRRRI, but even if and when MRRRI becomes law, we'll have to work together every single year to make sure that it's implemented and doing all the kinds of things that Trevor, Riley, Scott, and Alex talked about in your states. Just like other big pieces of legislation like the Farm Bill and WRDA have to be re-implemented and revisited through that in the MRRRI scenario through an action plan and that science plan that Trevor talked about. So again, this is all to say we are just in the beginning of what we're hoping is, you know, a long story about restoring the Mississippi River. And I will share in the next slide here. We're excited that we have a lot of momentum for it right now. We have over 100 organizations, businesses, clubs, and farms that have officially endorsed, and I'm going to tell you in just a second about how to do that yourself if you're interested. We have 10 mayors from 6 different states. We have 20 plus state legislators who have endorsed, maybe a couple of you who are already on right now. And of course, as I said, for HR 4202, 9 co-sponsors from 7 different states and DC. So here is how you can support, and I've broken this down by individuals. So how individuals can help us get past the finish line. And I just want to really say that we are all energized to get as far as we possibly can right now. And we have a really good opportunity. We have a window right now, right now, to tell Congress that this is something that in their very, intense portfolio of things that Congress is working on right now. This is part of it and connected to so many things that are troubling our communities when it comes to public health, supporting our local economies. This is connected. So the first link there is that same action that I shared at the beginning of the presentation. This will send an email to your representative and your 2 senators, encouraging them to support MRRRI. And then the second piece is just joining our community of One Mississippi River citizens. This is how we communicate with our grassroots supporters on all types of issues, MRRRI and lots of other things. So we would love for you to join us that way. And for those of you who are representing organizations or also part of organizations, hopefully you can all take these individual actions and then also take back to your organizations. As I said, we are just in the beginning of this process. We need every type of organization. We need lots of representation all up and down the river. So on the first piece, we would love for your organization to officially endorse MRRRI. It's a Google form. You'll join that list of 100+ organizations, businesses, clubs, and farms. And you can also join the MRRRI Collaborative. So we'll share our contact information, but that, we have a MRRRI charter that you can sign on to. We meet quarterly, we share information. Again, another way to be involved in the shaping of this now, and we would love to have you. And then in terms of your connections, all the people and networks that you already have in your Upper Mississippi River states, if you have a relationship with your mayor, if you have or are a state legislator, we would love for you to join us. We have different endorsement forms there for you to click and join us that way. And then finally, just in oversharing more, if you need more information, you can always visit the Mississippi River Network's website. We have a page that's focused on MRRRI. It has all of these links that I've shared with you today in one page. So it's mississippiriver.org/MRRRI. And of course, Lake Pepin, Clean Wisconsin, FMR, all also have MRRRI content on their pages. So check them out. And then if you're so inclined and would like to track the House Bill HR 4202, that's just the congressional tracker for current bills. So you can see as co-sponsors join us or if we have any other updates on the bill itself. But that will conclude our presentation. And even with our moving Zoom rooms, we are right on time. And we have 10 minutes to hear from you for any questions, comments, feedback you have. I'm looking at the chat and I'll take the comment in the chat. But if you'd also just like to use the reactions feature in the bottom toolbar to raise your hand, and then I can just cue and call on folks. You can unmute yourself and speak your question. But I see Rep. Billings, when looking at Centers for Science Study, I suggest you're in contact with University of Wisconsin La Crosse River Studies program. They recently celebrated 50 years and received a River Studies vessel from Brennan Marine. Fabulous. If you have a contact for us to make that connection, Rep. Billings, that would be fantastic.
I do. This is Rep Billings. I do have a contact, and it would be Mike Haro, Haro, at UWL. So I think it's always a real positive thing when you can get future leaders and academics involved, and so that might be a nice place to go to.
Absolutely. I think we have plenty of policy wonks represented at this point and could always, I think, our academic and research folks, I think we certainly need more of them to get plugged in.
Great.
That's a great suggestion. And we will email everyone the recording. I think we'll have to go back and see what we can piece together, but let me find what we'll do if we aren't able to piece together our 2 Zoom rooms. We'll send a couple of links to previous webinars that we've recorded about MRRRI that have a lot of the same content. And what we can also do, since this presentation had specific content for the states, we'll just send the slides so you can look at the slides. But you can, if we're not able to patch it all together, we'll send you some previous webinars and the slides for this one. What other questions or reactions or thoughts do folks have?
I'll just butt in and take a little bit of our end time here to thank Representative Billings, and also Representative Shelton's office was on earlier for your work helping to organize and support MRRRI publicly. A lot of those state legislators on that slide a little while ago are from Wisconsin, and that is in large part due to your work engaging your colleagues. So really appreciate that and look forward to continuing to work on this.
Maybe if you don't have oh, go ahead.
I'll also mention, well, first of all, thank you for that. It's an easy thing to do. La Crosse, the area I represent, is right on the Mississippi. And actually my family owns property up on Lake Pepin. So I am an appreciative of the Lake Pepin Legacy Alliance for the work that's being done up there too. Thank you. I mean, we're all so connected on this, aren't we?
Absolutely. I was just going to say, if people don't necessarily have questions, but are just incredibly excited about this and know how to use the reaction button, you could display your reactions of excitement about the possibility to dedicate funding to the Mississippi River.
Woohoo! Love it. Hannah, thank you for the question about volunteer opportunities. I will plug again that we are excited that this webinar is part of our Mississippi River Network's River Days of Action. We have a few events this weekend, but I don't think any of them are in St. Louis this weekend. But yes, sign up to receive our newsletter, and when you sign up to become a river citizen, you'll receive our newsletter, and we often share opportunities that are happening through our members in the area. Oh, Christine. Okay, Christine's up in Alton, so that, yeah, not too far from St. Louis. And then Hannah, if it is
so I was just going to say, the Sierra Club has a booth where we'll be doing Gyoteku fish printing, and that's when we talk about native fish species and invasive fish species. But there are also a lot of other organizations that are looking for volunteers that day too. So there's a wide variety, and I know it's tomorrow from 10 to 4, but it's 30 some odd year. It's gigantic, really worth going to.
fun? And Hannah, we just missed you. There was a cleanup with the stream teams and Great Rivers Greenway on Tuesday, Wednesday of this week. So they're another good group to follow. But if you visit our MRN, the other thing you can do is visit our MRN website and take a look at our members and the members who are in Missouri, and just start following those member orgs for future opportunities in St. Louis. Any other thoughts, questions, excitements? Alrighty. Well, we really appreciate, first of all, thank you to my co-presenters, Trevor from Friends of the Mississippi River, Riley and Alex from Pepin Legacy Alliance, and Scott from Clean Wisconsin for taking the time to put together this presentation. And thank you to all of you for taking your Friday afternoon in June to learn more about this exciting opportunity. Please take that action and be part of our River Days of Action flow of change for the river. And we will be in touch with all these links and the recording, or else other places to find this information. So thank you for taking the time, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.